Hey guys, good morning. You're probably wondering why I'm in an empty parking lot in the morning, first thing. It's like 8:30ish or something. And the reason why is actually I'm stopping by Detail Garage real quick. They are having their 1-year anniversary sale this weekend. So yeah, gotta pick up some stuff. But then hopefully I have some exciting things planned for the rest of the day. So real quick, change of scenery obviously, and as you can see the car behind me, it is up on jack stands because we're working on getting the car lowered. One thing though, I want to give a major shout out to one of the viewers, Giovanni. He mentioned getting these little guys installed on all 4 wheels because I was feeling a slight vibration. And even though I'm very well versed, I'm actually really bad when it comes to rims. I understand the general concept of, you know, like the measurements and the offset and all that good stuff, but one thing that I didn't take into account was the center bore. In this case, this set of rims has a wider center bore, which requires you to put a hub-centric ring to eliminate any little small flinch or vibration. So I went ahead and got a set of these. So since the car is getting worked on, we're gonna install these. So yeah, I'm gonna show you that. And so real quick, we're down here. This is the rear right, so the rear passenger. And honestly, it's not even hard, guys. And it's on there. And look, I'm actually pulling on it and they don't come off. Whoa, well, that's funny. And there you go, ta-da. Seated, so when you put on the rims, you shouldn't have any issues. Even if you're well balanced, you should be able to just eliminate any kind of extra vibration. They make these in kind of a plastic material. They also make them in steel, so it's really up to you. It's just, you know, your preference and whatever color you want. Some companies make them in nice colors, so yeah. But also, sneak peek, what's missing. So peekaboo, guys, you see what's in between these spokes? It's not a black spring anymore. So update to what we're doing right now is, as you can see, what's missing there. It's kind of a crucial component. So real quick, one of the reasons why I'm actually not doing an actual full length and DIY install video of this is particularly because when you're talking about suspension, it's actually quite a big deal to have it done right. And though some of you guys might be a little savvier and hands-on and have the proper tools to do this, I don't want to misguide anybody and kind of give advice that might be, you know, taken the wrong way. So just my biggest disclaimer is, if you're going to do this on your own, please do it with the help of a professional or an expert. Be very, very careful because there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're either removing or reinstalling. And obviously once you reinstall things, you want to make sure that you did everything right, because otherwise your car is going to fall apart when you're driving down the road, and it can honestly be a very dangerous and hazardous and fatal situation. So that is my disclaimer. I'm going to show you one part of the install that's not for the faint of heart if you guys don't have the proper tools. And so right here, this video, you see that the actual front strut tower is clamped down, and you see these 2 little things scrunching down on the spring. So essentially what you're seeing there are spring clamps. You do have to clamp down the front springs when installing lowering springs, both on the removal and insertion. Simply, once the springs are compressed, if not done right, if the pin isn't set in, because of, well, I'm pretty sure you guys have seen a spring before, even when it comes to a pen. When a spring is compressed and then you let go, there's so much energy and force there that the spring can honestly come up and either hit something or hit one of you guys and seriously injure you. So again, this is why I'm having professional help with this install and not trying to do a DIY. So yeah, just be very cautious. I am showing you guys obviously what to expect. If you guys don't have the help, then I would suggest taking it to a shop where they can do it for you. I know it's going to cost you a little bit of money, but again, safety is kind of my biggest thing here. If you've ever seen one of these springs just kind of uncompress, there is a lot of force behind it. So again, guys, just safety first. Yeah. So that part, the stock spring was removed, and so we have to slowly uncompress it, so we can reuse those same clamps on the lowering spring to compress that, and then basically install the front strut tower back to the way it's supposed to be and put it back on the car. So yeah. So another thing is that when the lowering spring is being installed, As you just saw in the clip, we were decompressing the stock spring to reuse the clamps. I did mention that you have to compress the lowering spring, basically so you can put the top hat of the strut tower to obviously seal it up so the spring obviously isn't going anywhere. But one part to also note there is that the spring has a specific way that it has to seat in there, and then the cap also has a specific way of how it lines up. There is a notch in the center where the cap will basically sit on to basically be installed correctly and properly, and that way the spring isn't going anywhere. If you carelessly kind of just throw it in there assuming that it's seated, you may have some issues, and you may have the spring obviously uncompressed improperly and once again hit you, you know, or causing damage to the actual strut tower itself. Or even worse, obviously, if you do it kind of the wrong way, once you finally reinstall everything back together and hit a bump or a pothole, you know, you can have some issues. So I know that these examples are kind of a stretch, and most people, you know, should have common general knowledge before doing something like this. But again, all of this is just a disclaimer, you know, while this thing is getting installed. And this is honestly probably also one of the reasons why a lot of people prefer to just do coilovers. All you have to do is basically just bolt them on. So yeah, it's kind of a bolt on. So yeah. So quick update, this one's done and ready to be installed. One cool thing is if you are doing lowering springs, most of them will let you know which ones the front and the rears are. And honestly, you should be probably able to tell just basically based off the fact that some are larger than the others. For those of you who really want to know, now that everything's kind of taken off, this right here is where the strut tower sits. It's honestly just being held on by these two bolts. And obviously you just need to remove that bracket that holds the brake line, and also just remove that linkage. So honestly, the majority of it is just two bolts. Those right there. When we come up to the top, quite literally, there's a little seal that you would just pry off. That right there. And then the three bolts, as you can see, 1, 2, 3. And it basically just comes down and out, and you have that. But the car's gonna sit nice. It won't be super aggressively low. I'm not trying to get super low. So once these are back and reinstalled, I'm gonna give you guys a walk around of what it looks like now, as opposed to what it looked like before the lowering. So yeah, excited. And as we speak, fortunately, the project is coming to an end. I know I didn't really explain too much of what was going on, and it was mostly me being disclaimers and cautious, but I'm really excited that we finally got this done. There was actually a lot of other things done, like the video you saw last week, which was the resonator delete. And thanks to Giovanni once again, we also put the little hub center rings because the bore on my rims is a lot wider than the OE bore. But let's get the car lowered. Let's go onto a flat surface and show you what it looks like with the Megan lowering springs. And I'm also going to kind of do a little drive, you know, with some turns and twists. With some twists and turns, and just let you know how I feel and if there's any kind of performance gain. So let's go. Alright guys, so I'm turning onto this long stretch of road that if you've been watching me for a while, you should already recognize. And now that the car's lowered, especially on a flat surface and smooth surface like this one, you're not really going to feel much. You definitely feel small bumps and whatnot a lot more than you obviously would with the stock springs, but it's nothing like jarring or, you know, it's not bad. I'm really not going to record much more just because this is a, you know, a straight. So we're going to get to something more interesting, and, you know, I'll kind of give you my diagnosis from there. Alright, so here we're doing more city driving. I'm going onto a more bumpier road because there's construction being done. And so here, let's go over some obstacles. So you definitely hear it, but it's not jarring to the point where it's uncomfortable on your body. You probably hear it more in the actual suspension itself, but it wasn't so bad. Even going through an apartment complex like where I live, going over speed bumps wasn't anything, you know, overly bad. The shocks, keep in mind my shocks are pretty much brand new, so you know, they still work effectively, so there's still some sort of cushion. There wasn't any kind of rebound, and these aren't low enough to the point where my particular exhaust system that has a huge muffler would start scraping at all. If you have any other exhaust system besides the Greddy, this probably won't be a problem. Even if you have something like the Arc, which some people complain that it hangs a little lower, you should be fine with this type of drop. So I'm pretty sure you heard that. My mud flap scraped back there. But that's really it. I mean, it's nothing too bad. In case you were expecting a driveway that was inclined, that one just has kind of a dip. So I'm overall pretty happy with the way that these springs lower the car. Again, I'll show you guys the outside right now in a moment so you guys can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. Alright, so we're outside. Forgive me for the bad parking job. But, real quick, so you should be able to tell the difference already. There's barely any wheel gap. I mean, it's like 2 fingers worth, and not even that, maybe a finger and a half. That's the rear. I'm gonna walk over here to the front, and the front has a slightly bigger gap. This one probably is about 2 fingers comfortably. Stepping back so you can kind of see it, but the car looks nice, even though it's not washed. So I'm kind of showing you the front end. Now keep in mind, this is just lowering springs, guys. This isn't anything drastic. You're not on coilovers, you're not on bags, so there's still quite a bit of a gap. In person, when you see it, you can tell it's low. Just as an example, look at the mud flaps. They're pretty low. But here, I'll show you what coils look like. So we're over here on Amy's car, and keep in mind the coils are adjustable, but right away you can see that the gap is almost non-existent. This is pretty flush with the body, at her settings anyways. Going forward, you can kind of tell the same on the front wheels. She's pretty well tucked in. At her settings, she's not scraping either, so she's pretty good. It just looks nicely tucked in. The disclaimer obviously is if you're going this low though, you definitely want to check your wheel specs to make sure that you're going to clear, because if you had rims like mine with these coilovers, or at least at this drop setting, you probably would have to roll your fenders. Alright guys, so we're on this road again. We're about to get onto this freeway entrance. And I'm going to drop it into 3rd gear. And as you can see, I'm going about 40 miles an hour and relatively quickly, because there's less body roll now that we're lowered. So that's one cool thing about being lowered, is you don't feel like you're gonna lose traction by taking an aggressive turn like that. But we're gonna go onto another roundabout to go onto another freeway, and this one's a little longer. And that's kind of one of the things I love about these lowering springs, is that when they're not jarring, like I keep on mentioning it, you know, they're not like really rough and stiff, but it gives you an extra sense of confidence when you're taking tight turns, because one, the center of gravity is lower, and two, you don't feel like, you know, you don't feel the body roll as much. You don't feel so top heavy. So right here, I'm in 5th gear. I'm gonna shift down to 4th. It says suggested 25 miles an hour, but again, you just feel so comfortable that the car can actually do it. And I'm gonna shift now down into 3rd. And we're going 40 again. Minus your tires, you might notice or be a little concerned with your traction. But again, I'm on the stock original tires and nothing at all. Now let's jump a few lanes. Hey guys, say hi to Miss Kitty on the right. So she's sitting on coils, and one thing that you can kind of notice is that on her bumps, she does kind of have a little bit more of a bounce at the rear end. Again, part of the whole Veloster not having independent rear suspension. Yeah, you saw that? It's not a deal breaker. It's just part of our cars, you know. Unfortunately, we didn't get the fancy independent suspension, so if you're watching this video in the future and you're buying a 2nd gen, you probably won't have that issue. Alright, so here I have the 2 Velosters side by side, coilovers on the left and springs on the right. And as you can see, even here, so mine still sits a little bit higher than the car on coils, and again, it's obviously lowered. So this is just something to show you guys, kind of a reference and what to expect. I don't have a stock ride Veloster, otherwise I would show you that difference. But one thing that I did forget to mention is I made a comment earlier about having a bouncy rear end for the car on coilovers. That's actually something to expect regardless of if you go coilovers or springs. It's just the nature of the fact that one, you've stiffened up the suspension and it's not rear independent suspension. So that's just something to take note of. I'm just gonna kind of do another walk around for you guys to see if there's any differences you may notice. And lastly, we'll go to the back, see if we notice anything there. gonna hear me some crunching leaves. So here's the back, and I mean, even though you might see them kind of same ride height, in person I can tell that the left car is again just slightly higher than the right. And you can definitely tell once you get closer by looking at the wheels. Whereas with the aftermarket rims, I'm sitting pretty flush with the tiniest of gaps. Here we have some tucking going on. So hopefully that gives you guys a rough idea. So guys, my overall impression of the springs, and sorry for the change of scenery. Unfortunately, the original video had a lot of wind noise and it was just getting really annoying. But I'm overall very happy with the outcome of the lowering springs. Like I said, I have dealt with Megan springs before, and I know that they're very high quality. And actually, it's one of those manufacturers that makes springs that aren't so bouncy and rough. Again, that's kind of a big thing for me. Coming from other manufacturers like iBox Sport lines where the drop is more aggressive, but you do get a bouncier ride. I'm very satisfied with these. Things to note is that obviously the rear will always have some sort of bounce just because this car doesn't have independent rear suspension. I know that's kind of a major thing that is being addressed in the second generation. So for those of you guys, if you ever hit a pothole on the rear end, you feel the whole rear end kind of sway or move around a bit. You know, that's the main reasoning why. The other thing that I was being nitpicky about is the fact that I do feel that the rear's lowered a little bit more than the front. But overall, that's just, you know, me and my perception of it. You know, I could be a little off, and maybe the springs just have to settle a little bit. And speaking of settling, if you guys install springs brand new, you do have to wait a little bit for them to settle. So what that basically means is that after your installation, you might see the ride a little bit higher than what you're expecting. They basically have to settle in so that way it gets to its optimal drop. It's just kind of a normal process of lowering springs. Number two, after you do lower your car, it is highly suggested that you go get an alignment done. The cool thing about these springs is that it wasn't such an aggressive drop that it actually didn't mess with my alignment as much. And I won't lie, truthfully, I haven't actually gotten the car aligned yet, but the car still steers the way it should. So I know that it'll probably just be minor corrections here and there, so that's kind of good news. There are springs out there that have a more aggressive drop. This is one of the least aggressive ones. I know ARK or ARC makes a kit that's also very similar to this. So again, just depending on how much of an aggressive drop and the comfort level that you're trying to go for, this is going to be up to you. I chose these because it's one of the least aggressive drops. You don't end up sacrificing comfort too much, and for the wheel specs that I have, this type of drop sits you flush. I know you can go lower, but obviously do so at your own risk and make sure that your wheels will clear, otherwise you'll have to roll your fenders. Last positive is that, as you saw in the video, you do lower your center of gravity by being lower, so it does make the car more firm and planted, especially if you have wider tires or even better tires altogether. The car just displays more confidence, and all of that will just be amplified once you get more suspension work done, like the rear sway bar, which from what I hear transforms and makes the car completely different. So that's about it, guys. If you have any questions that I couldn't address, please feel free to comment down below. But as always, thanks for all the love and support. I have a lot of videos already ready to go for the next few weeks of more installs, so I'm really excited to share that with you. But until then, keep doing you, and I will see you guys next week. Bye. So if you guys stayed for the outtake this time, we are teaching this person how to drive stick.
Safety first.
She knows, but newer cars have rev hang. Oh my god, and we have a passenger. So, guys, if we die, 3 people dying, 2 Veloster owners. This should be interesting.